Welcome back to the Monmouth Basketball Hawks Nest podcast. This is our 2023-2024 preseason show. We are pumped to get going here 2 days from today on Monday night at George Mason for the Hawks. Excuse my voice. I've been sick for a few days now, and I'm not all the way back there between getting our house ready for a baby on the way, getting school stuff in the gym. I'm a phys ed teacher, so I'm constantly shouting all day long, and not a good combination with being sick and just being all over the place. So apologies for the voice, but it is what it is tonight. We're going to try to power through. I could have done this Wednesday, and I blew off Mark because I had something else going on. So Mark tried, and this was the only time we could do it. So Mark, how are you doing? What's going on?
Everything's great. About to have a little break from school, November break. I told the kids this week, I said, have the best November break of your life. Very excited for college basketball season to be rolling in, especially after what was overall an utter disaster for Monmouth basketball last year. Ready to turn the page and see a lot of questions on this team answered come, November and actual games.
So going back to last podcast real quick, if you didn't see it, I'm hoping you did. King Rice, for the first time, was on our podcast, and it's a show that we really weren't expecting and truly never thought would really happen. Gary Colwell reached out to me. We got together, we put some questions together, and they were very open and honest. And they said, don't worry about sending us questions, hit them with whatever you got. And that's not always common for a head coach in Division I basketball. Sometimes they want to screen questions. And I think there were a few questions that he thought were coming, and maybe we left on the table because of time. But I think he was ready for everything. And not that we went easy on, but we were more in a friendly mood and wanted to start everything on the right foot. We weren't going to hit him with anything too hard in the beginning. You had one about a recruit that he put his head on the table for a few minutes with Cole, and he had to deal with that one. But overall, I mean, King, I don't think he could have been a better personality on the podcast. I don't think we could have asked for anything more. He was very open and honest, and we really had 10 questions. It wasn't even a stacked list of questions. We only got to about 7 of them because King had a 12 to 15 minute answer for every question. And before we knew it, we were an hour and a half in, and I texted Mark, I'm like, we got to get out of here. Like, this guy, he probably wants to go home, but he kept talking, and that's how King is. When you get him in this type of setting sometimes, and you get him in a mood where he wants to talk, he's one of the greatest storytellers ever. We've been in practice with him before, and he's talking about how he got Walker Miller and different stories he's told us over the years a few times here and there. And he's a great storyteller, and that's a great interview for us to have on. And, thank you to Gary for starting it, and thank you to King for coming on, because our fans really enjoyed that. And it's the first time they've had an interview really with him besides, post game with Eddie, in the press for a few questions with Steve Edelson. You haven't seen King do many things like this. So it was really cool for our podcast to be the one that kind of had a long conversation with him.
Yeah, and I think when you're running a low mid-major program in a major market area like central New Jersey that bleeds into North New Jersey and then the extension of New York City, there is so much competition for getting people to pay attention, come out to games, buy Flow hoops, that you really have to be more open, give that insight, fan friendly. And King, for a long time, I don't think was like that out in the public sector. I think when you were able to run into him, go to practice, see him somewhere at an event or even out around town, I think he's great. But he really didn't put himself out there that much in uncontrolled environments. Like you had said, the King Rice show, the Badger podcast, some things with Bizaz or Eddie, or a little bit with Jaden or Edelson over the years. But, you have to respect the fact that they did not censor anything that we were coming with. They, King went off, answered questions we didn't even bring up. And he was just open, honest, and really the way that I think you have to be at a low mid-major program where there are many other opportunities for people in this community to find quality entertainment. Like, you're not at North Dakota State where there's 3 feet of snow and there's no pro teams and anything, and everybody flocks to that gym to go see the basketball team. This is different. And, I guess it took a while to get to that step for King Rice, and also his acceptance of us and what we do, in the public, but thought it was amazing, hoping that it is a springboard for more open lines of communication back and forth with us and the Monmouth basketball team.
Yeah, you also don't have, in other states like Rutgers, 30 minutes north 18, and there's other teams around. Even if you go to the Monmouth Mall, when I was a student there, you couldn't find a Monmouth sweatshirt or apparel in the mall. It was Rutgers. They had a whole wall, like a 30-foot wide wall that was dedicated to Rutgers. And I'm like, we're 10 minutes from Monmouth. So in this market, you definitely have to get creative. And I think even watching some of the coaches around the league, especially Charleston, that guy's always involved with his students. He's always doing crazy things on Instagram. And I'm not saying everybody's got to do that, but it's good to get out and talk to your fans. And I think he also realized with his podcast, we're not the enemy just because we talk about the team. And, once in a while, when you're losing a lot of games or you lose a big game, the fans are going to be upset and some are going to be a little bit negative, and we talk about it. Usually we're pretty positive on here. But I hope he realized from the show, we're just two big fans that talk about the team, and we're the only show in town that does it. There's no student podcast, from what I understand. There's never been. So besides Eddie's, telecast and the student, radio, there's really no other coverage besides Edelson's articles. So I think he realized we are just super interested in the team, and, we want him to succeed 100%. There's never been a day where we want King Rice to lose to get him out. Like we want this team to win, and, that's the whole goal for us. But, looking forward to this week. So we start at George Mason Monday night. And then we travel to West Virginia for game 2. So George Mason's one that I had circled as a win. I think this team is going to – they're in a slightly higher conference. They're in the A-10 now. I thought they were still Patriot. I realized they moved up a little while ago. But they were projected for 7th or 8th in the A-10, which is still respectable. But I think this team is going to come out. And the pieces still got to fit. We need Valencia to get some games in. We need some guys to get a little more experience and get a feel together. But I think the main guys, the Vuga and Collins and some of these guys, are so sick of what went on last year with the 6 or 7 wins they got. And I think they come out with kind of a screw you attitude to everybody else. Be like, you know what? You left at us last year. We're coming to play and win this game tonight on the road. And I think I had that circled as a win on my board when we were talking about records the other day in our group chat. And then West Virginia, I think it's
9 scholarship players. That's all they'll have.
Yeah.
9 scholarship players. They punted the Jose Perez setup. They just got their other starting guard, Kira, just got suspended for 9 games based on what he did in Arizona, something that was illegal per the NCAA, I guess. Another guard was a 2-time transfer. He did not get the waiver. They're only going to come in with a small handful of guards, and I think their starting power forward was at Iona last year. One of their starting bigs, unfortunately, had a major medical incident in their preseason game, and they don't know if he is going to be able to play, but they're expected to have 9 scholarship players. I believe only 4 or 5 scholarship guards. You say they're going to beat George Mason. I don't see it. I don't see them beating George Mason, but you know what? If you're ever going to have a chance to beat West Virginia, and I know that they got screwed at West Virginia years ago at Brees Cafani at the end of the game, so it's almost like the basketball gods are coming back full circle, and they owe us one. This is a game Monmouth is going to be in because of so many circumstantial things that have happened. I don't see them beating George Mason. I just don't see it right. George Mason has a new guard, a new coach was a guard there, Tony Skinn, when they made that unbelievable NCAA run with Larinaga. He hit the portal. They have some good returnees. George Mason's going to be tough. They're going to be in the game with West Virginia. We might see, for the first time in a long time, Monmouth getting a W over a power conference team.
Yeah, and you know what? You look at West Virginia, and I think most fans pencil that as a loss early in the season, like you're playing a Syracuse or, not quite a Kansas, but you're playing a top 25 team. That's not West Virginia this year, guys. They are at the bottom of the Big 12, along with maybe a couple other teams. And Bob Huggins is gone. He had his off-the-court issues. They have a whole new regime in there. They have all new kids in there. It is not the same up-in-your-face defensive culture they used to have. It's a whole new program. So they are building from scratch. Think about Rutgers, 6-7 years ago before Pikel got in there. That was a dumpster fire of a team that Monmouth beat pretty easily, besides the last couple minutes. They made their comeback when we were at Rutgers a little bit, but we still won the game. But think that kind of thing when you think of this West Virginia team. They are not that same kind of team anymore. So I'm not saying we're going to win the game outright. We can, but I don't think this is going to be a double-digit tragedy of a loss like we saw at Illinois and some of those teams last year. I think this is going to be a game, and I think we might take a few people by surprise. And before ESPN realizes how bad West Virginia is, maybe we'll wind up on the upset alert in ESPN for a night and get some highlights out there from Monmouth, because maybe they won't realize how crappy West Virginia really is this year. And, we'll get some highlights there. And you move on and you get your home opener versus Princeton. Massive game, always an awesome, awesome game environment when we play each other. You remember the Robinson years where we beat them 96-90 at home. We had a Ray Salnave walk-off buzzer beater. I was sitting about 2 rows behind the bench at Princeton. We've had some battles with them over the years, and no matter how good or bad either team is, we always seem to play well against each other. Besides last year was not so great, obviously, but nothing was last year. But Princeton, I'm pumped for that game. You get Lehigh.
Henderson is a phenomenal coach, Princeton coach. He wins every year. He's to 20 wins, top 2 or 3 in the Ivy League, but they graduate their top 3 scorers, and one guy, Tosan, was on the NBA radar. That's a lot to overcome. So, you know what? All that I'll say is, if you're going to play Princeton, you want Princeton early. You want them early before these other guys get into their roles. Now, everybody's going to say the same thing about Monmouth because they got some young guys, some transfers, whatever, but I am pumped to have Princeton early. That's a game that I have circled that I want to be in the Ocean First Bank Center for. Princeton opens with Rutgers. I think they're playing in Camden, neutral court setup. So, you'll be able to get a good measuring stick of where Princeton is early. Henderson's great. He schedules hard in the non-conference for what he can get. He has a hard time getting games, but that's going to be a great one. And to jump in on Lehigh's second best team in the Patriot League this year, right behind Colgate. So, Brett Reed. Yeah, Brett Reed, he had CJ McCollum. He's been to 3 NCAA tournaments. They beat Duke. He's just continued to win there for many, many years. They have a really good backcourt. That is a sneaky, very, very tough game. I think, Monmouth fans, people who are more casual college basketball fans, they'll take a look and they'll kind of be like, oh, Lehigh, Patriot League, you know what, we should be good. That might be a tougher game than Princeton based on who Lehigh returns and who Princeton returns.
And then after that, you get 3 games at the Palestra for the tournament. Truthfully, I was actually, for a minute, I was a little concerned about this tournament because some of the Ivy Leagues, particularly Penn, are dealing with a lot of off-the-court issues with this whole Israel-Palestine thing going on. I mean, I was worried this whole thing might get canceled because of the way UPenn, I guess their university, I don't know all the details, but it seems like their university has kind of dropped the ball in how they're handling some of these things. So I'm like, are these guys going to host a tournament? Are we going to be allowed on campus here?
Ryan was like, hey, satellite it over to the Ocean First Bank Center, satellite it to Atlantic City. Ryan had all the other options.
We're good, man. I mean, Monmouth has not commented at all on it from what I know. They're not having these protests or these crazy things happening on campus and taking these ridiculous stances. So, have it at Monmouth. Who cares? Well, spend 3 days in West Long Branch after Thanksgiving. It'd be a lot easier than going to Philly. I'm trying to get there possibly for the Lafayette game Saturday. Friday, there's just no shot. And Sunday, we got work the next day. So I'm going to try to get there Saturday. Belmont, typically.
That's the game to go to. Lafayette stinks.
Yeah.
That's the game to go to. Want to see Monmouth get a win there?
Yeah.
Lafayette stinks. And it looks like Ryan cut out temporarily. Penn is going to be right up there behind Yale and Princeton in the Ivy League. That's going to be a tough one. Belmont has raised their profile and moved up in conference the last couple of years. They run intricate offensive sets that make a basketball X's and O's nerd like myself, basketball coach, just go unbelievably crazy for them. One thing that I will say, how awesome is that Monmouth is in one of these tournaments where it's close enough that you could make it to one, two, or all three games if you really wanted to, and B, you're not matched up with the one or two seed in the tournament that is the Kansas or the Kentucky. Like, this is a great protected tournament for Monmouth. They should be in something like this every year. So hats off to, I know Coach Callahan, he runs a lot of the schedule. This is an unbelievable tournament for them. Belmont might be just a little step up in class for them, but I think we're better than Lafayette. I have that as one of my wins. And I think, hey, Penn lost their leading scorer, Dingle. He averaged like 27 a game. He's going to start for St. John's this year. Okay, he's going to Rick Pitino route as a grad transfer. So you know what? They got a lot of guys stepping into different roles. They're always a good program, but they're Ivy League. Like, you're in the CAA, Monmouth. You should be able to take down the third team in the Ivy League. So hey, you know what? The goal should be give Belmont a game, kick the hell out of Lafayette because they stink, and then let's get a win against Penn. We've beaten Penn in the Palestra before.
Listen, we beat Penn when we were 0-12 that year. Or 0-9, whatever it was. But yeah, I mean, I think the goal for the weekend should be at least 2-1. You walk out of there at least 2-1. I think you won the weekend. If you 3-0 is a bonus. Obviously Belmont's a step up, but they're traveling a little further than we are. I think they're in Nashville. So they're traveling a lot farther than we are. Probably got to take a plane to get here. Maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe it doesn't. And who knows? But there's no reason we can't get out of the weekend with 2-1. Then you move on. You get Cornell on the road. I think it's a game we thought last year, even with a depleted team, we could have had, and they ran us up and down the court.
That was a game I went to, and that game was not competitive about 6 minutes in.
It was rough last year.
That was
we got paid back that game.
That was one of the worst Monmouth basketball games I've ever watched.
Yeah, and then you get Northern Illinois at home, which is a pretty good game for home. I believe they're in the Missouri Valley, which typically gets a couple.
Mid-American, I think.
Mid-American, sorry, yeah, Mid-American. But still, really good conference. Step up from us. That's a really nice home game for us. You hope that Northern Illinois is playing well, and maybe we get some extra brownie points for that game. I don't even know what to call them anymore. RPI, net, whatever. Ken Palm. I don't know. There's 8 different things to look at now. But I think it's a good home game for us. Hopefully they're winning in the Mid-American, and that raises our profile if we can win there. And then you're at Seton Hall on my mother-in-law's birthday. Shout out Marie. I think I'm hoping to get to that game. I'm hoping we may be having dinner on the weekend before or after. I might be able to sneak up to Prudential for that game. So that's the massive game too, because last year we opened at Seton Hall, and truthfully, the first half we didn't even look bad for as depleted of a roster as we had, and no one knowing their roles. Even guys like Sandu got a lot of time in the court. Like, I mean, we didn't know anything at that point of what this team was going to be. In the first half, they were there. Second half, Shaw did his thing. He pulled away. But I think this is a different kind of game this year. And, Seton Hall will be favored in the game. But I don't think Holloway's team has taken quite the step that we expected them to take in the first couple of years. I think it's a game where if we start rolling by that point, I could see us keeping it competitive and maybe pulling an upset at the end. Again, Seton Hall should win that game. They're a big team. But you know what? You get rivalry games like this. You get King and a little extra motivation with his, little brother Shaw going at him. I think Monmouth maybe hangs in that game, and that's a game everybody from Monmouth should get up to. If you're able to get up to Seton Hall, don't let it be all royal blue, all right? Bring some Navy up there and try to, make it like 20, 25% Monmouth, and let's get a crowd up there because that's a really big game on that Tuesday night.
I think a better game is Rider. Rider
But
is
Riders,
preseason favorite in the MAC. They have a couple guys who are preseason all conference. They brought in a couple good transfers to support those guys. Murray graduated. Rider is almost always a very, very, very good regular season team. And the earlier in the regular season, the better Rider is, because we all know they shit the bed later in the regular season and in the conference tournament, but under Baggett. But Rider is loaded. Ryan said that Monmouth should never, ever, ever go and play at Rider again. He made that perfectly clear. So he's got Rider coming in. Uh, Ryder is going to be a big challenge for this Monmouth team. I know that people are going to turn their nose up and say, well, we moved above the MAC. Ryder would be right there in the top 5 in the CAA.
yeah,
And
I
then,
mean, I think it's a big time payback game from last year, because King was irate when he left Ryder last year, and I don't know what went on, but he said after the game, and I don't know if it's true or not. Maybe it was in the emotion of it, or maybe he's serious, but he pretty much made it clear that we're not coming back here. And I just think the students there, there's a difference between getting under your skin, because every college in the country that has real fans at their game, they're close to the court, they're going to get under your skin. They're going to say things. They're going to be loud. They're going to be in your face. But the Ryder kids just, the things I've heard over the years, even, when Max DeLeo was my roommate for a year at Monmouth, I would hear things from him, that some of the things the kids would say. And I'm like, that's out of control. That's so out of pocket. Like, I wasn't even believing that he was serious. And I think King got tired of playing in that tiny ass gym that I don't believe it's full regulation. I don't care what anybody says, whatever that length is, 92 feet or whatever it is for college. I'll never believe that size court is actually a Division I court. And I know it's perception. People will tell me whatever. I want to actually go there one day with a measuring tape and actually measure it out, because there's no way that tiny little court where nobody can move around or set a screen or go anywhere is regulation. But that's besides
well,
the
you
point.
better get there
But
quick, because they're going broke and they might be closed within the next couple of years.
yeah, I got a feeling TC&J is going to buy them out in the next 5 years or so. That's just me. But, we may be seeing TC&J become, the new rider and take over for them. But yeah, I don't think King ever wants to go back there. I know him and
Oh,
Baggett are friends, but it seemed like it got really weird last year. Us being in the CAA, them being in the MAC, they crushed us a little bit. But I think things just got wacky last year there. And, I think King is going to be fully motivated to game plan for that game. He's going to have his kids ready to go. He's like, we are not walking off our home court with a loss to these guys after the way that they treated us last year. I think King's going to be fired up for that game. And that's going to be the one where in years past, I would say the jacket would come off, but they're not wearing jackets anymore. They're wearing polos. So maybe a clipboard gets thrown or something. King's going to be fired up in that game. And that's one I have circled big time on my calendar, because, Monmouth Riders always had that little bit of hate between the schools. And now after last year, we're not conferences, opponents anymore. But there's one more year of this big rivalry going back and forth before it might die after this. I don't know. But, I think that's a big one to circle on the calendar.
and then Manhattan, they're going to be horrible. They're going to be one of the probably 50 worst Division I teams this year, I believe. They punted their whole setup. Rashawn Stores, former point guard, championship point guard there, took over as the interim coach, did a great job. All the players wanted him back. They didn't even get him into the final selection. He got passed over. Then you have some roster turnover. You have Gallagher, who was over at Hartford. Hartford dropped from D1 to D3, which was a horrible thing there. But that roster is not ready to compete. I think Manhattan will look a lot like Monmouth looked last year, and Monmouth should roll at home in that one.
And then you get Oklahoma on New Year's Eve. Shout out to Vinny, my father-in-law, New Year's Eve birthday. A lot of games on birthdays this year. Nothing on Nicole's birthday, though, Christmas Eve. Nothing there. Oklahoma, not a top Big 12 team. Again, they'll be favored in the game, just like West Virginia, just like Seton Hall. But I don't think that's a game where we necessarily have to get blown out in. I don't know if I'll pencil it as a win, but I don't think that should be a 30-point loss. I think there's a good chance that we could keep that one within 15, 16 points and maybe single digits in the first half. I don't think there's any reason for us to get completely blown out by them. The only thing I'd say is Monmouth doesn't always play well over the winter break. And that's always been the history the last 13 years since I've been around. My freshman year was King Rice's first year, so I've been around as long as he has. And I just remember that December 22nd, 23rd game and those winter break games, we just always seem to struggle during that time. So it really depends how motivated this team is. If they're all locked in and they're ready to go and they're not feeling the holiday blues going back to school, then maybe they surprise people and play well in that game. History doesn't say that, but hopefully they're locked and loaded and they go to Oklahoma and they are at least competitive.
So I hate the unbalanced CAA schedule. I don't understand how you can truly crown a regular season champion and how you can honestly and fairly seed teams for a conference tournament. Hate it. Think it's BS. I also think there's way too many teams in the CAA. I hate the CAA. I wish we stayed in the MAC. I've been pretty open and honest about this. The enrollment of the other teams, the finances of the other teams, it's very difficult for Monmouth to compete. On top of all of that, you start with 2 home games during winter break when no kids are there. On top of that, 4 of your first 5 CAA games are against teams that are in Tier 1 of CAA, in my opinion.
Rough
Towson,
stretch.
UNC Wilmington, College of Charleston, and Drexel. And Northeastern's going to be right there with Monmouth, in my opinion, battling for that, 6, 7 seed or lower, higher in the standings. That is a brutal stretch. UNC Wilmington reminds me of how Manhattan was. Everything's a foul up and down the court every 90 minutes. It just depends on if they're going to call it or not. College of Charleston is loaded. They have the best coach in the league. Towson probably has second or third best coach in the league in Pat Scarry. They reload every year with transfers, super talented. And Drexel, led by Williams, who we saw last year, he looked like Victor Wembanyama against our bigs. He is enormous. He's long. He's strong. He's preseason player of the year. And he is a load, and he makes everything go around him. Monmouth's starting 1-4 in the CAA.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where you're like, you look at that schedule, it's so daunting. You hope that they can climb out of that with 2-3, 3-2 if they're really lucky. But it's a tough stretch to start. I mean, the only one you really pencil as a game we should get is Northeastern, but it's still not an easy game.
Also, you're gonna have no home court advantage. Towson,
right, the other 4 teams.
I mean, students don't come anyway. Let's be honest. The students stink. They don't show up. Don't stay for the whole game. We need more. No students, are up there on Instagram. I know you have some on TikTok now, but the students need to step up in general. I know that we have such a smaller enrollment versus some of these schools that if they get 10% of their students, they have 1,000 kids there, and if we have 10% of our students, we have 350. I understand that. However, when you don't have any students there, you're at a huge disadvantage. And when you're going up against Towson, who's been one of the powers of this league far long before we even sniffed the league, that's going to be really tough, Ryan.
It always bothered me being a student at Monmouth when, there'd be a 7:00 game on a Friday night, whatever it was, MAC play, and I'd be like, "Hey guys, you going to the game?" And they're like, "No, we're not going." I'm like, "Why? What are you doing tonight?" "Oh, we got a party." "What time is that?" 9:30. "Okay, well, go to the game till 9. It's going to be over at 9 or 8:55, whatever, and go home, shower, put in your jeans and white T-shirt. You're going to wear the party anyway. It'll take you 10 minutes to get ready. You'll be at your party by 9:30. It always bothered me when so many people would not go to the games because, oh, we have a party, or like that's part of the fun at a bigger school, at a school that's serious about sports. You go to the games and then you go to the party and celebrate the win. Or if you lost, then you go drink it off and have fun anyway. Like that's part of being at a Division I university. Like Monmouth is not a tiny school. Like we're not big, but we're not small enough where there's no one there. And don't say we're just a commuter school either, because there's plenty of kids in the dorms, plenty of kids 2 miles off campus, just like I was, right down Cedar Avenue. There's no reason to not have 400 to 500 kids at every single game. There's 5,000 enrollment around there. There always has been. And it's probably gone up since I've been there. So there's no reason that you shouldn't have 400 to 500 kids at every single game. So that's something that's always bothered me. I hope the team gets off to a good start and they step up and the students come out and have some fun with it. But I also think the university has to do a much better job. And I've said this before, especially at freshman orientation. That's when you get the kids. You get the kids for like a day or two. And if you teach them that we want to have a culture here and that we want to do things a certain way and that we'll have fun at the games, we'll do these chants, we'll bring the dry erase board back as long as nobody does anything stupid on it. Like, there's ways to do this and get student involvement going and have fun with it. And I don't know if our school does a good enough or creative enough job at freshman orientation, because once you lose those kids after those first 2 days, they're gone. Like they're studying, they're finding clubs, they're doing their own thing. If you lose those kids those first 2 days in July or August when you have them, they're gone. So I think that's something university has to look at. And hopefully over the years, we'll be able to figure out a way to get students more excited and more involved for, football, basketball, and even some of the other sports. Soccer, I was always at men's and women's soccer games. They were awesome. But there's no excuse, though. There's no reason to say I have a 9:30 frat party or a Halloween party or whatever it is, and I can't get to the game. It's 7 o'clock, sometimes 6 o'clock. Like, get to the game, take a shower, and go to the party. Like that always drove me crazy. So I don't want to hear the whole small enrollment thing. Like we're not that small. We don't have that big of an arena where we can't fill a few hundred kids. So that's my end of my mini rant there. You got me started. I wasn't going there, but you got me started, Mark. Thanks for that. But
everybody loves a good Ryan rant on the Monmouth podcast. In fact,
it's been a while.
Some of our fans just they're waiting for it. They call for it.
Last year, I couldn't even rant really because it was just kind of the same story. We only did like 5 podcasts last year. I was going through a lot and the team wasn't doing well and there was too much going on in our own lives and there just wasn't time to really do it. So I'm hoping to get a lot more in this year.
One nice thing with the schedule here is I believe the students will be back and Monmouth gets a get right game at home against Hampton. Hampton stunk last year.
Have that.
We scored like 110 points against them in the CAA opening round. One interesting thing about the CAA is it's very top heavy. So I had said Wilmington, Charleston, Towson, Drexel, Hofstra, that's your tier 1. I think Delaware is like the beginning of tier 2. And then nobody knows who follows Delaware. And that's where I think Monmouth's trying to fit in that 7th spot, maybe 6th if things don't go well for Delaware. So there are a lot of opportunities for Monmouth to get some wins in the CAA schedule because the bottom of the league is not particularly strong. Hampton being probably the bottom of the bottom down there with like NCA&T.
Yeah, I mean NCA&T, Campbell, Stony Brook, like none of those teams have proven anything. Stony Brook was good a few years ago, but not in this conference, not right now.
That's the game. That's the team that for some reason I see will end up being Monmouth's first CAA rival. I don't know why. We talk about how we hate forced rivalries. The Iona Monmouth rivalry just naturally made itself. Before that, it was Canisius. They were Monmouth's first real MAC rival. You had the Red Nicholas, the 3-3s, them walking off, Billy Barron breaking Max DeLeo's front teeth, the coach refusing to do a handshake line. These things naturally come. Unfortunately, regionalization tries to push these things, and it doesn't happen. We are not ready to compete with Hofstra. Hofstra's beaten us like 37 straight times. Whether it's a heartbreaker, whether it's a 30-point shellacking, they kick the hell out of us for every year that we play them. They cannot be our rival just yet. But for some reason, I just feel like there's going to be some fireworks or something with Stony Brook this year. And I think Monmouth can go to Stony Brook, which is a really nice mid-major arena there, Long Island, and I think Stony Brook's right there with Monmouth in that right after the Big Five and Delaware right there fighting for seventh. This is going to be a huge game for a Monmouth season with what direction it goes at Stony Brook, January 25th.
I just don't get, like, you got us playing Hampton, who's in Virginia twice. You got us playing Campbell twice, I believe. Why are we playing Hofstra once? Like,
No
they're
argument
supposed to be a rival. Like, I don't get it. Like, if you're trying to do
We only
teams that
played Campbell once.
Campbell once, all right. So regard, we play a couple other teams that are farther away, and more down south. Why are we playing Hofstra once? Like, they're the closest or second closest to our college. We've played them a million times over the years out of conference. Like, it makes no sense to me. Like, why would you not put those two teams that pit them against each other? That's like having who was it? Elon and Charleston play each other once, even though they're in North and South Carolina. Like, we're 2 hours from Hofstra. Like, why would you not play them? That makes no sense to me. Like, that's the forced rivalry you should be trying to pit against each other, because we've already had history with them.
I guess this is like the NFL schedule based off of PowerPoints from last year. That's how they organized it. However, it stinks. CAA commissioner is a new commissioner. Everybody play everybody twice, home and home. This setup stinks. We will tag you on Twitter, and I will say this to you. It stinks. You can't really crown a regular season champion. Not that you can go to the NIT if you win the regular season CAA anyway. Another horrible dig at mid-major basketball, because all we care about is Power Fives. And then what happens? The NCAA tournament comes, and what does everybody talk about? The 13 seed that beats the 4 seed from the Patriot League or from
St. Peter's.
Right. So everybody is so damn tone deaf. I don't know. Maybe this is my rant, but that is a horrible, horrible job of the NCAA and the NIT. And then this CAA setup doesn't make any sense. We're not even regionalizing matchups. We're going based on last year's standings, which more than ever now with the transfer portal, a team could be totally different. You could go from worst to first easier than ever before in a one-bid college basketball league. We have too many teams. That's the real problem. There's too many teams in the CAA. That's the real problem. That's why now everybody play each other twice. But if you're going to truly have a conference and seed for a conference tournament and give a regular season champion, everybody plays everybody twice.
I actually had to click the link to make sure I wasn't seeing like a fake news story when I saw the NIT thing. Like, I know most people don't care about the NIT, but honestly, here's the thing too. If you are at a major college in Iowa or West Virginia, one of these schools, those fans do not care about the NIT. They don't care. The only time they care is if they're like a lower level big high major team and they're starting to build with a young group and their team is the one seed in the NIT, maybe they pay attention because next year they might be good. Every other team, those 5 and 6 seeds from power conferences that make the NIT, no one cares.
You
the
saw
gyms
last
are empty.
year,
They don't care.
went and beat Rutgers in the 4-5 game at the rack because Rutgers didn't give a shit about it, and it was a huge steal for Hofstra.
Right. I mean, listen, when we played Ole Miss and even Ole Miss, it was snowing outside when we hosted them for the NIT team. We still got over half the building filled, and we just got our hearts broken. We realized Robinson and those guys will never play in the tournament, and we still had the building pretty full. When we played GW, when we played Bucknell, like all those NIT games, we packed the place because it mattered to us. We're the 1 seed. It mattered. And like, how can you tell me that the tournament's going to do better with the 8th or 9th team from the Big 12 or the A10 versus a team from the CAA or the MAC or somebody that won their conference, went 25-6, but doesn't make the tournament because they got knocked off in one night in March? Like, that makes no sense to me. Like, you said it. It's such a tone deaf, just idiotic way of thinking of how this tournament is supposed to run. Like, you might, I hate to say this out loud because I don't want to, but you might as well just separate the Power Five, because what are you telling everybody?
It must be, you might as well just be, we're FCS, we're 1AA version of
Right.
Division I college basketball.
And nobody wants that, because here's the thing. if you're not a true college basketball fan, you watch the first couple rounds. You watch for your bracket, you watch for the upsets, and guess what? Once the Elite Eight hits, no one cares except for the schools that are in there or the true basketball junkies. Okay. Some years I barely watch the Elite Eight. If my bracket's out and the teams I'm interested are out, and it's Iowa versus Michigan State again for the 11th time in 13 years, I don't really care that much because to me, it's not as intriguing. Now, Carolina Duke, got to watch that. Okay. So games like that, the historic games like the Kansases, those games you watch. But the random Elite Eight game, I just, San Diego State versus UConn, certain games, I don't care that much. Like you miss so much of the essence of the magic of the tournament when you take the mid-majors out of it and you devalue their seasons. Like there's so many good mid-major teams. You saw Furman beat Virginia last year. Nobody thought Virginia would ever lose another game like that after the UMBC 16-1 debacle a few years ago. But they did it again. They lost to Furman, who wasn't that great of a team, but they were solid enough. They had a game plan. And that's part of March Madness. It's one given day. If you want to turn it into a high major tournament, just do it. But you're going to ruin the entire March Madness experience, and you won't have nearly as much involvement because you won't get 8 million people watching St. Peter's versus Carolina. You'll never get it. If North Carolina last year was playing an A10 team or a Pac-12 team, I don't think the ratings would have been half as good as it was for St. Peter's versus Carolina. It adds a lot of value when you get that Cinderella run, and you see it almost every year. Maybe not to the Final Four and Elite Eight every year, but you see your Loyola Chicago's and George Masons. You see it every year. So how can you tell me that the tournament is more valuable when you add more high major teams? Maybe it's better basketball to you because it's more NBA players and more 4- and 5-star recruits. But look at Kentucky last year. I mean, Kentucky lost 2 early on. So, or maybe that was 2 years ago. But regardless, no, that was St. Peter's. That was them 2 years ago. So, I mean, I just don't get how to devalue us like that. It's crazy.
Could have been us if that ref would have called that foul where Shavar Reynolds was obviously pushed out of bounds, or if we didn't continuously double off of Doug Edert every time and leave him wide open for threes. But you're asking me, Mark, you're crazy. You're telling me that a Thursday, January 25th, the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th CAA game is a make or break for Monmouth's conference season. Well, here's why. Ryan was talking about magic. Monmouth might need a little magic in the next 3 games after that. So they need to get Hampton. They need to get Stony Brook because then you are home for Hofstra, home for Drexel, 2 of the Big 5, and then at Delaware, who I really think is head and shoulders the 6th best team. That's another brutal 3-game stretch. Okay, yeah, great. You're home for Hofstra, you're home for Drexel. Both of those programs' fan bases will travel because both of those teams are going to have gaudy records at that point in the season. I know Hofstra loses Aaron Estrada, who was Player of the Year, and he's moved up to a Power 5, but Speedy Claxton's a great coach. They reloaded again. Thomas is one of the best players in the league. He came up from Sacred Heart, up transfer. That's to me, that's another 3 losses. And then you're looking at, for me, you have 3 wins at that point, and you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. You're 3-7 to start CAA play. The good news is we promised you there are a lot of winnable games down in that second half of the CAA, and that's when you get a home game against William and Mary. There's another get right game. William and Mary to me looked like an Ivy League or a Patriot League team last year. They're not, anything special. You're at Northeastern. Again, I think you have a chance there. Then you get Campbell and Stony Brook at home. If you can get 3 of those 4, then all of a sudden, you went from 3-7 to 7-7 or 6-8. All of a sudden, you're right back in the mix where we thought you would be. Again, the schedule, the way it's outlined, is not favorable, but you can go on these little mini runs as long as the kids don't get super down, playing those bigger and better schools in a row.
And listen, you also hope that because this is a more experienced team with some transfers, because it's a bigger team, maybe you steal one. Like maybe you're not going to sweep those teams, but maybe you steal one versus Charleston or Wilmington or Towson. Maybe, maybe if you play those teams 6, 7 times, maybe you steal 2 of those wins and then you beat up on the rest of the league and maybe you get 10, 11, 12 wins. Like you hope, and we're going to get into the roster in a minute, but you hope these guys that are a little bit bigger and a little bit older are able to kind of mask what happened last year. And we're not quite the same team. And maybe we're not that far off from those teams. Maybe we're closer to the middle than we are to the bottom. And there's no reason that the 6 or 7 can't knock off the 3 or the 4 on a given night. So I don't expect us to have a winning record versus those 4 teams. But if you steal a couple, you're right in the mix for that 6 or 7 seed.
So what's interesting is that February 17th, you're home for Stony Brook. That could be a chance where maybe Monmouth wins those 3, and then it's, do we get to 500 or do we not? Again, Stony Brook becomes, this is the next part of the schedule where it's kind of another huge game for how Monmouth's season's going to go, because right after Stony Brook, looming large is an away game at Towson, very difficult. But then our final 3 games are all very winnable. Home for NCA&T, I think that one is as slam dunk as a win as you're going to get. At Hampton, I think we're clearly better than them. And at Elon. At Elon, Robbie Higgins versus Monmouth, last game of the regular season, could have a lot of meaning for schedule, for where you're going to be in the seedings in the CAA tournament. Hey, Monmouth can go on another one of those little runs there at the end of the season. So I think it's going to be a lot of peaks and valleys with the way that the schedule is set up. I wish that it was set up a little bit more jumbled with winnable games and then those difficult games versus packing all of those stud teams together in a row. But overall, me personally, I see Monmouth winning about 4 or 5 non-conference games, and I see them right there 8 or 9 CAA wins. So I think they're right around, looming around 500 in the CAA, and I see about 4 or 5 non-conference wins. So pessimistic 12 and 20, optimistic 14 and 17.
Yeah, I think Mike said 16 wins total. I think he was around there. I think we'll be around 15 or 16. I think there's a path because maybe I'm more optimistic on the roster, but I just see I think we have some diamonds in the rough on this team. I think we have the kid, what's his name from Newark? What was his name? Robinson? No.
Oh, Robinson's from Camden.
Who was the kid I was looking for? We have a kid. King talked about him a little bit. He got in trouble because of the state playoffs for basketball. That was Robinson.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
King said, we all saw the footage. He made a mistake. And, King said, you have to give kids second chances. And, he talked to people around the situation, and he's a straight edge kid. He's a good kid. And he made a mistake in the heat of the battle. And you know what? I'll take that kid anytime, because you know what? If high major schools want to jump off a kid because he got into one fight in a state playoff game versus a rival, okay, we'll take him. I mean, this isn't a kid that beat somebody up in the street or, did something truly horrific, assaulted a police officer or did something crazy out there. He got into a fight in a basketball game versus a rival. And the rest of the school was brawling too, and the kid was involved. I mean, I'm not going to blame the kid. He took his consequence. He took his lumps, and some bigger schools got off of him. And we were standing there apparently to take him in. And why not? So, I love that kind of kid. So we get him. We get Xander, who we know is a proven commodity at this level. And I think he's going to be really strong at Monmouth. He's been here basically his whole life. We get Valencia we can see play. Everybody was on him. And then for different academic reasons, they backed off. He got his grades right the last couple of years, last year at Monmouth, and he looks like if things go right, he could be a top 10 player in the CAA based on what we're hearing. And you see film, and the kid's ridiculous. And, I think this team has enough people. You add Jack Collins, you add Vuga for another year. We see how Nikita from Ukraine is going to do. I think you add a lot of those pieces together, and I'm optimistic enough where I think we can physically handle the CAA now. And if you think about it, we had 5 CAA wins last year. Did we get 5?
I think it was 6.
6. So if we get 6 wins last year, and you saw the roster that we had, you add these guys to it, I don't think there's a reason why we shouldn't be able to win 10, 11, maybe even 12 conference games. So you go even 12-6. I think that's on the higher side, but even 11-7, I don't think that's unrealistic. And Mark, can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
I just want to make sure I wasn't fading out there. I don't think there's a reason this team can't win 10, 11, 12 conference games and then win a handful in the out of conference. So I'm going to peg him right around 16 wins, just like Mike. I think the high side 17. I think on the lower side is 14 for me. I think this roster is much improved. And if you get into it a little bit, we'll look at it here. Even guys like Jaden Doyle, we didn't see much of him last year. He really didn't get much time. When he was out there, he showed a couple of flashes here and there, but you really didn't really know what you have in this kid. Now King's telling us he might start. Like, I was shocked to hear that. I'm like, listen, I'm glad he's had a great summer. I'm glad you're telling me that. But if that's actually the case and this kid starts over some of the kids we brought in, Mom was in pretty good shape because I wasn't expecting Doyle to be much in the rotation at all this year based on who we brought in. I had him pegged as the 10th or 11th kid on the roster. So if that's the case, if he's really the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th best kid, Mama's in pretty good shape because they got a lot of kids that came in. Jakari Spence comes back a year under his belt, got a lot of experience last year, looked great again in the Jersey Shore League. This guy, Abdi Bashir, I don't know if I'm saying that right, but freshman guard out of Nebraska, he looks really good. You can see the videos from the Monmouth night the other night. That kid looks poised as hell. He looks confident.
He's freshman beyond Hammond, I think.
Yeah, he looks really, really good. He looks like a solid, just tough basketball player. And that's something we were lacking a lot last year.
Yeah, it's interesting. We hear all this optimism and, obviously every CAA team that's not in that group of 5, and maybe besides Delaware, because I think Delaware has, if a couple things go right, they could probably compete with them. Every single other CAA team is saying, we brought in this kid, we brought in that kid, this kid's gotten better, blah, blah, blah. We can compete to be the 6 or the 7 or the 7 seed. So we're all kind of having the same conversation here. One thing that worries me is when you look outside of the program and outside of the Monmouth inner circle. The highest I've seen Monmouth projected in the CAA was 7th, and then I've seen them, I think the lowest was 12th or 13th. I've also, a journalist that I respect the hell out of, Kevin Sweeney from SI.com, he ranked the entire nation, had Monmouth at 303 out of, 360 something Division 1, 10th in the CAA though. So, like I said, the bottom of the CAA is really bad. And busting brackets recently, they just came out with their list. They had Monmouth 292. These lists are all over the place. It's just good for us as a fan base to try to look not in those Monmouth lenses and kind of look out for, outside the program. But then, like Ryan and I say all the time, we have opinions. We say this, we think this is going to happen, prognostications, but we're not there every day. Like King Rice is there every day. We don't get to see these kids practice. We don't get to see, I couldn't tell you really what Nikita could do. I know that he has a reputation as a strong rebounder. He didn't do much at Tulsa, but he was very productive at a junior college powerhouse, Northeast Oklahoma. Like, he could roll into the CAA and be an absolute bruiser and be the X factor that makes Monmouth look pretty damn good. Valencia, I think Valencia could be the Kawhi Leonard of the CAA. He also, for the first half of the year, could have a ton of rust, and doesn't. King told us he doesn't have a lot of, time in games. Bashir's a freshman. He could shoot it, high ceiling, but he could be overwhelmed defensively. Boog Robinson could be a matchup nightmare as a 6'6" guy who could guard 2 through 5. He also could end up being Tyrone O'Garo. We don't know. Like that's the problem. Spinelli came in. I thought he was going to be the guard starting with Xander. We haven't seen him. I think he took 12 threes or something last year in Division One. So, is he going to be reliable? Is Andrew Ball going to, take a jump this year? Is Jakari Spence or Doyle going to be that glue guy, like the Marcus McClary, the Josh James? There's so many questions that we won't have answered for a little while. And one big thing that I think we can all agree with is I think this Monmouth team is going to be a lot better in the last third of the season versus the first third of the season. And this is why you play who you play in non-conference, and this is why you have 12, 13. I think Monmouth has like 19 guys on the roster this year, but 12 or 13 scholarship guys. This is why you have them. And King, to his credit, when he doesn't have established roles on a team coming into the season, he does experiment. He does give everybody a fair shot, whether it be preseason games, practice, exhibitions, scrimmages, or even a lot of those non-conference games. So we're going to learn a lot. That's what's really exciting. There's a lot of reasons for optimism. There are also reasons to be concerned. I think we're all a little jaded from last year, and I can't wait to move past that. King has had a handful of 20-loss seasons in his career. We have moved up into a higher league. But remember, the second year in the MAC, after we weren't good the first year, we were 18-15. We played Iona really tough in the semifinals of the MAC tournament, and that catapulted that team. Xander is pretty much everything for this team. We only had 12 assists a game last year and 14 turnovers. We scored under 62 points a game. We shot under 29 from 3 and under 67% from the free throw line. Xander Rice, almost 38% career three-point shooter. He's a good assist guy, 84% free throw shooter. He's the straw that's going to stir the drink. He has a chance to be one of the best 5 guards in the CAA. He has a real chance to be one of the top 10 players in the CAA. And if he can do what he can do offensively, and we can find a way to keep opposing quick guards in front of us defensively, which is one thing I'm very concerned about. I think Xander is extremely smart, extremely talented, doesn't have the foot speed. So I'm wondering, is Doyle, is Spence, can Spinelli, can one of those guys guard the opposing guards? The other day, King had said about New Hampshire that they had an issue keeping their small guard in front of them. So that's going to be something to keep an eye out for with Monmouth. I was high on Jakari Spence last year before he actually jumped in. That was like one of my whatever we had shocking prognostications. Spence is probably going to be really important again with less point guard responsibility. I think he's a guy, maybe Doyle takes the role, maybe I'm wrong, but one of those guys, quick feet, athletic, can stay in front of guys defensively. That's what we're really missing, because it seems like Nikita, I won't even try to say his last name, Vuga, Valencia, that's probably as good as most teams' front court in the CAA. And then you got Xander and you got Collins. That's a heck of a backcourt duo, which I would take against most of the teams in the CAA. It's just all those other parts. Who's going to guard the other quick guards? Who's going to be the third three-point shooter? And who's going to score off the bench? And hey, if Bashir could be your scorer off the bench, someone in the Spinelli, Doyle, Spence can be your defensive stopper, and those other guys do what everyone says they think they can do around the Monmouth program, then I'm wrong. They're not winning 8 or 9 CAA games. They're knocking off 1 or 2 of those other teams, and they're above 500, and we're really taking that next step to formalizing this program back to where it was right before we came into the CAA.
I'm going to try it anyway. I know Nikita's on Instagram and TikTok, so he's gonna see this. I'm gonna try it anyway. Nikita Konstantinovsky. All right, Nikita, let me know how I did there. All right, I know you're watching this. So yeah, I look up and down the roster, and if guys like Abdi Bashir, Jarrett Valencia, and Boog Robinson and Nikita, if those guys really are diamonds in the rough, and those guys are already contribute right away, this team's going to be in really good shape. Because you add that to the established Jack Collins, you add that to Clement Vuga, you add that to and also Xander Rice, we already know about. So now it takes a lot of pressure off those other guys where Jack Holmstrom's not a starter anymore. Jack Holmstrom's now pushed down the bench a little bit. And when he goes in there, maybe people forget about him and he hits a three. He plays a little, he's solid defensive end because he's only playing 8, 10, 12 minutes a game versus the 25, 30 he had to play last year. If Amon Sandu gets some minutes this year, people forget about him. He's a 7-foot giant in the middle. All right. Maybe his skills have developed a little bit over the summer. Maybe it opens up things for him in the middle. Like Andrew Ball. I'm really excited to watch him play and see how he develops. I know defense was a problem at sometimes, but the kid's a legit 3-point threat. I mean, he can really shoot it. George Pappas, in my opinion, I did not see the 3-point shooting ability with him like I did with Andrew last year. Now, of course, George did what he did, and he could always shoot it, and King said that. King said it, I think on his own podcast, that Pappas was super down on himself freshman, sophomore year because he missed so many in a row. He said, keep shooting. I know you can shoot it. It's going to go in. But the first couple of year and a half, we didn't really see Pappas as that star. I was questioning, is this kid really D1? And, Ball last year on the offensive side, when he slowed things down and he set himself, that kid could really hit three. He hit 3 or 4 in a couple of games. He really looked good out there. I think if he commits on the defensive side of the ball, and I'm sure they've been working on him with it, I don't see a reason why that kid's not getting 15, 20 minutes a game and, scoring double digits sometimes. You add that to the mix. I mean, there's a lot of kids on this team up and down. We don't know what Sam Fagan can do yet. We saw what Clement Vuga could do last year. Vuga was the MVP of the team.
Hell of a year last year.
MVP.
His props.
MVP of the team.
Ryan's been really high on him since the day he saw him the first time in Monmouth. And
so his freshman year, I think it was the COVID year, if I'm not mistaken. And I watched him play, and I'm like, this kid is so fundamentally sound. He is that European side who does everything the right way, and then they stop playing for whatever reason. And again, we're not in the locker room. I don't know why, but other guys were ahead of him. That's fine. But last year he took a bigger role on, and you saw it again. Like you saw, he's not flashy. He doesn't do anything special, but he does everything right, and he hits everything from 15 feet in. He plays well on defense. He hits the boards, and he has some nice little hook shots, a little, inside moves in the middle. He's a threat for us. And when you add that many pieces together, if they all fit and they all do what we think they can do, this is a top 6 or 7 CAA team. Now, if 3 of those guys don't pan out and they're not quite ready, then we're looking more at those projections where we're the 9th, 10th, 11th team. But I'm going to be the optimist here. I do think we have enough pieces to get to that 6 or 7 seed. I think it's going to be a tall ask to get into that top 5. It's just a solidified group, and you never know. An injury or two can change that, but barring injuries, it's going to be tough to get into that top 5. But I think the ceiling this year for Monmouth is that 6 range, and to me, the floor is around 10. So it's a big range, but I think based on transfers, based on everything we're talking about, there's a reason for that. I mean, there's a lot of uncertainty this year outside of Xander Rice, Jack Collins, and Clement Vuga. There's a lot of uncertainty. Apparently not Jared Valencia, because King told us he's starting day 1. That's him and Collins are pretty much penciled in there. But outside of that, it's a lot of uncertainty. So I think they have a ton of upside. And if it doesn't go well, then obviously we know what happens. But I'm excited to watch this first game versus George Mason and see what they do out there.
Yeah, I mean, nobody really knows until the ball is tipped. One thing I wanted to say about Andrew Ball, one nice thing is that he's not a stiff athletically. He's bouncy. He's long. He takes strides like a deer. I think it was more mental and the speed and the physicality of some of the older players he was going up against last year. And those things can be corrected, Ryan. It's hard to make a guy longer, stronger, jump higher, run faster. That's hard. But when the guy has all of that, those things can be corrected. It'll be an interesting year. I think Andrew Ball, for a multitude of reasons, has a chance to be a big time X factor, but also might be the most likely kid to be playing his last year at Monmouth University this year if things don't go right. Because there's a lot more talent ahead of him. So he could be, hey, you're going to tell me that he's going to be the sixth or the seventh man, and he's going to pump in 6-7 points a game and be really good for this team, and then continue for 2 more years. I could see it. It's the talent's there, but I could see it going the other way too. He's one that'll be very interesting to see how these things go. One cool thing was that Monmouth put out a video on Instagram of him working with Micah Seaborn. It seems like the kid's bought in. He didn't quit Monmouth after the first year. He's trusting. King said he commits to these kids for 4 years. I'll be very interested to see him. And one more thing that's understated is we thought Jack Collins had such a great year last year. He shot 29% from the 3-point line, and I don't think any of that is his fault. No one was able to create for him. You put him with Xander Rice, a couple of other shooters and bigger, stronger athletic bigs, I think that bumps up to 35% or higher for Jack Collins. Yeah, and I think he's going to have a big time year.
He's not going to be forcing it as much. I mean, last year constantly he had to force it because nobody else could shoot the ball. I mean, there were no shooters in that team last year that were consistent, so he had to take some shots that were maybe a little out of his range or a little off balance. And now Xander's going to be setting him up. He's got a 6'10" kid in the middle opening the lane up, and he's got other pieces around him that are threats, where last year you're on the court and at least 3 of the kids can't shoot. So, yeah, they're going to double team Collins or get up in his face, and they know if they get by him, well, there's no one else to pass it to. So that's going to change this year. And I think Collins has a massive year. And I'm going to say Collins will be at least 3rd team All MAC. I'm calling that for this year.
All CAA.
All CAA. So what did I say?
We were still in the MAC, but we're in the CAA. So
I'm sick. Sorry, my head's still not right yet. But I think Collins is 3rd team CAA. And I think Valencia will be either 3rd or 2nd team. I bet Monmouth gets 2 on one of
Xander. I think Xander's going to be 2nd team.
Xander might be in there too. We got 3 kids, I think, that have a really good shot to hit that list. So I really think we're in for a top 6 type season.
And unfortunately, it always goes to a big man. So probably Williams from Drexel's going to get Defensive Player of the Year again because of the block shots and everything. But the analytics on Jack Collins as a man-to-man defender are off the charts. So now that he's not going to have as much responsibility for creating and handling the ball offensively, he's going to be able to exert even more energy defensively. And he has the best motor of anyone I've ever seen in a Monmouth uniform besides Max DeLeo. And that's unbelievable because I love Max, but Max didn't sniff the basketball skill that Collins has. So if Collins can put it all together on both ends, bring up that efficiency, Ryan's right. He could be on an all-conference team.
Max, I won't disrespect to you like that. I won't say that you didn't sniff Collins. I'll say maybe Collins is a hair up. Can't do that to my roommate.
I love Max. Max was one of my favorite of all time, but the first 2 years, I didn't know if Max was a Division I athlete. And in those last 2 years, he was a different looking guy. But if we're looking at the trajectory of Collins, and he was all-conference rookie, we gotta give nods.
I was yelling at Max from the student section my freshman year. So I mean, he turned a corner when I started rooming with him the year before.
There you go, Ryan. Max DeLeo. There you go, everybody. He's a sports psychologist on the side.
Yeah, but before we get out of here, no, I won't take credit for that. Before we get out of here, I am not getting season tickets this year. It's not for a lack of interest. It's not for a lack of me not wanting them. I think I said before, my wife and I are expecting our first baby in early February. So I look at that schedule, and the baby can come a couple weeks early. So once I get past really that January 8th game versus Northeastern, we're away for a couple weeks. That Hampton game, January 20th on. I'm not sure if I'm going to see you guys for a while. I might get back towards the end of the season if I can sneak out on the weekend. But, Nicole, is a trooper and, she's doing well right now. She's doing great with everything. She's a champ, but I'm not going to be able to leave her by herself to tend for a newborn to go watch Monmouth. I'll be watching at home. We'll also do the podcast. The next one is planned for sometime after the West Virginia game. We'll combine George Mason and West Virginia, and
We'll have to try to get Kyle Franco on to preview Princeton.
Yeah. Yep. But yeah, that's why I'm not getting season tickets. Nothing to do with me not wanting them. It's just a matter of can't do it this year. And I will be at as many games as I can. I'm hopefully getting to mostly all of them before mid-January. But just if you don't see me in my normal seats, I might be floating around and trying some new sections out this year. Might sit with Mark for a game and see how that goes. He blows at my eardrum in the second half, and or doing a free throw or something, or yelling for a timeout, or I may try to sit behind King a couple of times and see what's going on behind the bench. So I'll be moving around this year, but you guys will still see me out there. But just so you're aware.
Yeah,
and there we go.
Kind of in the same boat, with coaching high school basketball the last couple of years. The overlap is really tough. Sometimes I'm at practice until 8:30, 9 o'clock, getting back from an away game 10 o'clock. So I don't have the season tickets, but I'm definitely much more interested in grabbing my Flow Hoops subscription this year and watching this team and getting there when I can. Like I said, I have the Princeton game circled as a definite. Really super excited for this team. Think that there's a ton of optimism. There's a ton of things to be excited about. And like I said, I think the last third of the year, this team will be so much better than they were the first third of the year, which is what you want. You want to be playing your best basketball going into March. One thing that I will say, you have to tip your cap to King and his staff last year, even though last year was a total disaster. They were playing their best basketball that last 7, 8, 9 games of the season, including the CAA. And they did only win 5 regular season CAA wins. I was thinking plus the 1 against Hampton. I had them at 6. So Ryan was right. I was wrong. But yeah, hey, maybe they can double that this year and get to 10 CAA wins. You know what? We're saying that top 5 in the CAA is really good, but guys, it's not Kentucky. It's not Duke. I don't think Monmouth will be visibly outclassed against, most of those teams like they were last year.
Listen, we were right with Charleston at home until the last 5 minutes or so. So you never know. All right. So that's going to do it for us tonight. Please make sure you tune in to the game. It's Monday at George Mason. Make sure you figure out wherever that's being streamed or on TV. I haven't even looked yet. I'll try to figure that out. But please make sure you watch that game. Get involved this season. Students, get to the games. Mark, you got something? You good?
ESPN Plus for George Mason and West Virginia.
All right. So ESPN Plus for those games. Students, get to the Princeton game. We're going to say this again on the next podcast. Get to the home games. And fans, hopefully you get there as much as you can. Hope everybody has a great week ahead. Enjoy your weekend. Stay safe, stay healthy. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.